Welcome to week 3 of playing Minecraft every day for a year. We start over at day 15.
I got started on finishing up the brown mushroom farm with the redstone mechanism that will occasionally send a signal to activate the farm. The first part is a hopper clock, which uses two hoppers facing each other, two pistons pushing a redstone block on top of the hoppers, comparators to detect items in the hoppers, and redstone dots to activate the pistons. A redstone torch on the side of the stone sends a signal through to a pulse extender, which keeps the trapdoors in the farm down long enough for the water to push the mushrooms into the collection system. Now, I did make one mistake. The pistons on the hopper clock are supposed to be sticky pistons, as it's a pull rather than a push that makes the clock work. I didn't have any slime at the time, so I took a quick flight to a nearby swamp to kill some slimes and collect slime balls at night. Whilst there, I encountered a couple of the new mobs to the game. Frogs! So I took the time to get them together and breed them so I could collect the tadpoles in buckets and bring them back to base. Of course, I hadn't planned for this, and I only had a silk touch pick, so I had to make some basic tools, and then I collected a little bit of coal and iron. I made a furnace and cooked the iron so I could craft another bucket, and then went back to wait for the eggs to hatch. Before long, there were some cute little wiggly boys swimming in my makeshift pond, so I scooped them up and took them back home with me. Back at home, I fixed up the hopper clock with the sticky pistons, and then released the tadpoles into the pond outside my house. Today is bee day. It's bee day for bees. It's actually fairly easy to spawn in new bees and beehives by simply planting rows of flowers and saplings next to each other. There's a small chance that when the sapling grows close to flowers, that it will spawn in new bees. So with a big patch set up, it's a pretty quick process to get a bunch of bees. I used some extra flowers to breed the bees that arrived, to ensure that all of the beehives could be full. You can tell that you've got enough when there's still a bee or two outside the hives at night, because they all try to go inside when it's dark. The farm setup is pretty simple. There's a row of hoppers with grass blocks and flowers next to them. There's also dispensers facing down above the hoppers, with a block gap in between. There's a simple pattern of blocks behind this for the redstone setup. A comparator detects the fullness of the hives, and a redstone line carries the signal up to the dispenser. At night time, I moved the hives into place, in the little gap facing the flowers, and then I closed up the space with glass so I can see if the bees are working. At this point, I noticed that the bamboo farm was going really well, and I had a bunch of ores that I need cooking up, so I made a small super smelter to make use of both. It's basically just a row of furnaces with hoppers hooked up to them. I set up a hopper minecart above the input hoppers to evenly distribute the ores across the furnaces, and it was good to go. Stream day again. Now, being a week since I started Farm Week, it's time to start covering things up and making the area look less like a construction site and more like a nice place to stay. I'm going to start with some house-like buildings for some of the farms, and then do something a bit more interesting with some of the others. For the bee farm, I did a pretty standard house design with oak log corners and crossbeams to start the layout. I added a cobblestone base and oak planks to fill in the rest of the walls. I placed some spruce trapdoors along the top row to hide the gaps from where the farm needs some slabs. I made an A-shaped roof out of spruce steps over the one end, and then filled in the gaps with oak logs. I continued the oak logs along the sides to support the spruce step roof. I used bamboo from the bamboo farm to make some scaffolding to help with the building process, and finished up the roof. I decided to add in a little window detail just under the roof made out of red stained glass and iron bars. A little unconventional, but I think it looks good. I also added a little curly thing as a bit of detail on top of the roof. To finish up my Minecraft stream, I wanted to add a little build to my nether portal to make it look more interesting and important. I saw the design whilst browsing TikTok and adapted it for my portal. It's some stone brick steps, some chiseled stone blocks, and some soul sand with fire on top for some interesting details. Today I'm doing a bunch of smaller tasks to continue on my daily adventure. First up, I wanted to expand the sugarcane farm. I've needed lots of redstone dust for making pistons and observers, so I went and got some blaze rods from the nether to make some more brewing stands. I placed them down in the village area to make more clerics so I could buy lots of redstone dust from them. I filled in the two gaps above the bottom layer with more modules of sugarcane farms to increase production. I wanted to start laying out where the decorative build would go around the farm, and realised it was very close to the edge of the cliff. So I extended the edge out a bit and made a mental note to fill in the cliff face when I have time. Next I started laying out the exterior of the decorative build, in a similar style to the bee farm, with oak log corners and a cobblestone base. I then used mushrooms produced from the mushroom farm to help expand the mushroom farm up a couple of extra layers. It was around this time that I was thinking about what I would do if I happened to die again, so I decided to get started on preparing a couple of new sets of armour. First, I bought the armour from the armourer and then I took it over to the enchanter to get some basic enchantments on the gear. Got a few good extra enchantments on some books, and added looting 2 to my sword. Doing all this enchanting used up most of my saved up levels. Lastly, when I went to check on my frogs, I realised that because they can jump up high, they have very easily escaped, and both for some reason had decided to head to the nether through the portal. Thankfully the room in the nether with my portal is fairly small, so they couldn't get very far. I lured them back to the overworld using slime balls, and built a new enclosed small pond in the village area to keep them contained and safe. With all of that done, I was finished for the day. Bye! First, I decided to clear out all of my trees one last time, so I could get a sense for the space that is there. Maybe I could use it for something, like a slightly bigger house prior to working on my mega base. I made sure to collect all of the saplings, because if I don't hoard all of the things that are readily available, then all of my limbs will fall off and I will die. Next, I wanted to start working on the path that will connect all of my builds together, so I decided to make a quick design for a streetlight thingy by testing out designs on the lamps I had already set up around the village. I ended up with a simple design of a slab on top with oak trapdoors around the sides of a glowstone block. I'm using glowstone for now because I can easily get some from the cleric villagers. Next, I laid out the paths between the builds by turning grass blocks into path blocks. Right now, I'm just laying things out and lining up the area because every time night falls, this area becomes super dangerous and creepers are a real threat to my farms. I then put up a bunch of lights, and I already noticed that it was much safer at night. When I take the time to make the path a bit nicer, I will probably add in some hidden lighting to completely spawn-proof the area. Next, I continue to work on the build around the sugarcane farm. I filled in the front wall with oak planks, and then I used some stair blocks at the top and bottom to add a bit of extra detail. But I still felt like it needed something more. I tried using some different trapdoors to add in a big concentric square design, but it ended up just looking like a big weird face. I filled in the rest of the walls and then went to gather some spruce wood so I could start work on the roof tomorrow. I started the day by checking up on my new and very haphazard frog situation. I gave them some slime balls to help them breed and make lots more frogs, but I also noticed that there were lots of villagers getting stuck in the high-class dirt hut, so after shooing the villagers away, I made a quick fence gate and put it in front of the door because villagers can't open fence gates. A few frogs had managed to escape in all of the hubbub, so I lured them back and dropped them in through the roof. By now, I've been living out of this little house for almost 3 weeks. I keep running out of storage space, and it's all getting a bit claustrophobic, so it's time to build a bigger house that I can work out of. I decided to make a similar house to the one I had been living in, but I doubled the length, width, and height dimensions, which makes significantly more space. I measured out the corners and placed oak logs down. I then added a cobblestone foundation layer to the walls before digging out the dirt inside and laying down a floor of stone, andesite, and a little gravel. I'm such a pro builder now that I'm adding something called texture into my builds by varying blocks of a similar colour. Next, I raised the oak log corners up to the correct height and connected them with crossbeams. I then raised up the walls, making them out of stone and andesite. To add some detail and depth to the top, I added crossbeams along the ceiling before adding a wood plank attic roof a block above. The last part of the build was the roof, which I made out of spruce steps to match the other builds I had already done. I also added a wiggly, curly decoration to the top of the roof. I'm not sure I love it, but it's definitely unique. I also made sure to add an overhang to the roof to add depth to the outside. The last step was to move in, so I made a bunch of boxes and placed them along the back wall, greatly expanding my storage capabilities. I moved all of my stuff over with shulker boxes, and organised it all and spread it all out amongst all of my nice new boxes. Following on from the success of yesterday's new house build, I started off by using signposts to label all of my new boxes to help me stay organised, and to help see where everything is at a glance. I then took a moment to add lamps on the end of chains around the outside of my house to help prevent mobs from spawning nearby at night. I took the bamboo from the bamboo farm and topped up the super smelter fuel box before taking the proceeds from the melon and pumpkin farm down to the village to do some trading. Next, I checked on the gunpowder farm and made paper out of the sugarcane from the sugarcane farm so that I could make a supply of rockets to keep in the base. I then went and farmed some spruce to make a bunch of steps for building the roof of the sugarcane/bamboo farm. A roof this big was of course going to take a long time. Thankfully, it was interrupted by my falling into the farm and then immediately getting blown up by a creeper, thereby damaging all of the farms. So I then took the time to repair all of the damage and added a bunch of glowstone blocks built into the farms themselves to stop anything from spawning inside anymore. I then went back to being a roofer. and by the time I was done for the day, the roof was about half done. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, and thanks for watching. Hit like and subscribe to help my channel grow.